The House is likely going to pass this $1.9 trillion package. It's going to be a lot tougher to get it through the Senate. Is there anything you'd be willing to bend on? Maybe minimum wage?
Well, Stephanie, it's good to see you. I would say, number one, this is a urgently needed piece of legislation. We're in the middle of an economic crisis. We're in the middle of a public health crisis, as you've been talking about this morning. And this is a clear prescription for that crisis. So we need to act quickly, and that has been the president's focus all along. Number two, we have been, over the course of the last month, open to incorporating ideas left, right, and center wherever we see them if they make sense. And you see that already reflected in the bill, whether it's the targeting of the direct payments, relief to small businesses, making sure that localities, the smallest towns and cities, get relief. All those things are already being incorporated in the bill. And we're going to keep having conversations and making sure that where we can incorporate ideas. What I think you've heard the president say he will not compromise on is the need to move fast and with the kind of speed and size that we need to finally get out of this economic crisis and put us on a positive trajectory.
Is he currently speaking to any Republicans about this bill and trying to convince them?
So we're in constant conversations across the White House, the senior economic team, including the president and all down. We are going to have a conversation later today with a bipartisan group of members around vulnerabilities to our supply chain and to American jobs, where we'll have Republicans and Democrats down here to talk about that urgent issue. So we're continuing to have conversations throughout. Obviously, we're staying very focused on the congressional process because we need this action, and we need this bill to pass.
This is a much more complicated recovery than we've seen before. You've got a portion of the country, those who are working from home, who own their houses, who are invested in the markets. Many of us are doing better than ever. And at the same time, a portion of this country is in absolute despair. How hard is it for this White House to actually convince the entire country to care about their fellow American?
Well, I think in a sort of optimistic perspective, it's actually striking the degree to which the American public recognizes the need for urgent action and supports urgent action. The American Rescue Plan is broadly supported across the American public, including among members of all political parties. And I think that reflects an understanding that even for those who have done relatively well in this crisis, they recognize that this crisis is affecting everybody. It's affecting our communities. It's affecting our health workers. And to your point, we talk about the K-shaped nature of this crisis a lot, but I think that understates the pain and the anxiety and the fear and the human suffering that exists on the bottom end of that K. When we talk about 30 million Americans who last week reported that they didn't have enough food to eat, this is a unique crisis, and I think that people recognize that that's the case, and people are willing to not only support the kind of action we need, but get behind it. I think that's an optimistic take, and it may not be that we find that kind of comedy across Washington, but I think we are seeing that across among the American people.
Released this morning a letter that 150 CEOs signed asking Congress to pass this relief bill quickly. That's a big positive for you. However, we know big business is on board with a whole lot more money being pumped into the system. More money in the system, more money for the American people to spend on those businesses. Are those same CEOs as willing to sign off and say, yes, we will accept a corporate tax hike, which is a priority for President Biden?
Well, I got that letter right in front of me, and I agree with you. It's an important signal, again, of the kind of breadth of support that we're seeing for this rescue plan. And I would say it's not just big business. Earlier this week, we announced a set of changes to Paycheck Protection Program, which is a lending program to really try to target the smallest businesses, those businesses with less than 20 employees. And, 90% of businesses in America are less than 20 employees. And what you see from those businesses is an even more urgent call for action, both directly to support them as a bridge to recovery, but also to help provide additional demand into the economy so that they've got customers to come to their businesses. Look, to your question about the broader agenda, it's a conversation that we're going to have. We're going to keep making the case. And certainly, the conversation we're having later today about supply chains is an important one. If we have a corporate tax code that actually encourages companies to take a production and activity offshore, then we're sort of fighting against the kind of recovery that we want to see here at home. So that's certainly one of several issues that the president will be raising and reinforcing with members of Congress, with members of the business community, and elsewhere.
But do you think those same CEOs will accept the fact that they're going to have to pay their way too, and that might look like a 28 or 29% tax rate?
Well, we'll see. Traditionally, we have seen, differences of opinion in the business community, with some being willing to support that type and some not. We certainly hope that there is a recognition now, particularly in the wake of the tax cut in 2017, where there were a lot of promises made about the overall economic impact that it would have that really didn't materialize. And also an expectation among corporate America that in a time like this, where, as you say, there's been such disparate outcomes, economic outcomes, that there's a broader recognition that we need to do what's right for the economy as a whole. So we're certainly hopeful that we can make that case. And certainly we know the American people are behind that type of action.
The PPP changes are important. They're what we've all been calling for, because we know how many businesses were eligible but didn't need the money and happily took it. But are you worried for those very small, vulnerable ones that it's too late? We've already lost hundreds of thousands of businesses in the last year.
400,000 small businesses lost already. It's a tragedy, and it is going to be too late for some of them. But it's not too late for the PPP right now, and this is important. And for small businesses out there that are watching, for the next 2 weeks, starting today, we're going to have an exclusivity period where businesses with less than 20 employees are the only types of businesses that can apply. And there is a significant, still outstanding resources available for those businesses. And we're talking about, the smallest businesses, the sole proprietors, the single employee business. And that's particularly important for communities that have been hardest hit. 90% plus of black and brown businesses in the U.S. are actually single employee firms. And so we're doing a lot of outreach to try to make sure that people know that this is a resource that's available. You can apply. There are still lending available here, and we're going to keep making that case between now and the end of March, when the program expires. 2.5 million women have left the workplace since the pandemic began. Last week, Vice President Harris called that a national emergency. We have millions of kids out of school. What is in this COVID relief package that's going to address this emergency? Well, we couldn't have a more urgent issue here, because not only have we seen a disproportionate impact on parents and women coming out of the labor force, but we know that with every passing month that somebody stays out of the labor force, it affects their lifetime earnings, because it's a lot harder to come back if you've been out of the labor force, and we know that employers look negatively on people who have been out of the labor force. The American Rescue Plan was really designed to try to get right at this issue in a couple of ways. First, resources to get the schools open. If we're going to get parents back to work, we have to get kids back in school. Second, support for childcare, and particularly childcare facilities. This is not just about K-12, it's about the childcare facilities in the 0 to 5 range that are really struggling to stay open and stay open safely. There's significant resources that would go directly to them. And third is continued support for paid leave. One of the things that we know that is forcing parents and women out of the workforce is if they don't have access to paid leave, that could be a trigger. Somebody in their family gets sick, they need to deal with a parent or a kid, they have to leave their job altogether. Having paid leave is not only good pandemic policy, because it reduces the transmission of the disease, but it's great economic policy as well. All those things are in the plan, and we could make a lot of progress over the course of the spring if we had those resources and those tools.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.